God equips Moses for the assignment. In verse 3, God gives Moses a foretaste of what to expect by using what Moses already has in his hand. So God's not sending you out ill-equipped. God knows that what you need, he's going to provide for you. Whatever God calls you for, he provides for. Whatever he calls for, he provides for. It would be totally unfair for God to ask you to do something and not give you the things to get it done. We don't serve a God like that. We serve an all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful God who has prevision. And because of his prevision, his ability to see the beginning from the end, he provides provision, the stuff that you're going to need before you get there. God also assures that he will give Moses the words to say, in addition to sending his older brother Aaron to speak on his behalf. So God equips Moses. He takes all of his excuses away. Takes all of his excuses away. And then the third takeaway for me is that God works in Moses before he can work through Moses. What do you mean, Brother Robert? Well, most of Moses' excuses seemed valid to me at first. But then I said, let's not minimize the fact that Moses lived 40 years as an Egyptian, practically raised as Pharaoh's grandson, and probably considered as a potential heir to the throne. Which means he had the best teachers, he was well educated, he was obviously skilled in combat, he was well spoken, he was groomed as a leader. Acts 7:22 even confirms, it tells us that Moses was learned in all wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. Moses was mighty in words and deeds. This is prior to the burning bush experience. So this whole thing about being slow of tongue and lacking in speech, come on, Moses. So when Moses thinks that he's not the one for the job, God is saying, you are exactly the man for the job. The very circumstances that God arranged for Moses to grow up and be groomed in implies that he's the right one for the job. I think God was protecting and prepping Moses from his beginning. How many of us have beginnings that are starting to fall in line with what we think God might want from us? Or what God might want to do with us. And I don't mean that it's standing in the pulpit. I mean whatever it is on your job. Your beginnings have fashioned you for where God is placing you and the circles that he's moving you in. So perhaps Moses' real fear was twofold. One, that he didn't really have a relationship with God, and found it difficult to trust God. I mean, after all, Moses was being raised in the courts of Pharaoh. He would have been well versed with the pagan gods of Egypt, but not the true and living God of his father, not the true and living God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And number two, initially, Moses was a fugitive. And during the last 40 years, Moses grew accustomed to living in Midian and was at peace because his secret was safe. Now God interrupts his life with a divine burning bush encounter at Mount Horeb. And for the first time in a long time, Moses is grappling with the notion and grappling with the idea that he has to return back to the place that he ran from. It's very likely that some of the same people who knew Moses as a murderer are still on the scene. And perhaps it is this fear that induces this sense of unworthiness. It is this fear that brings upon this doubt in his heart. It is this fear that impedes his speech ability. But it is as if God is sending Moses back to Egypt to deliver him from the fear and bondage of his past in order for Moses to be the deliverer that he needs in the present. So we're never going to move past what we don't reconcile. We're never going to accomplish anything greater than our biggest failure, regardless of where it was. God has a way in his divine sovereignty of making us revisit those things that we swept under the rug and pushed under the carpet and locked up in the cabinet and stacked up on the shelf in the garage. God is intent on getting Moses free before he can use Moses to set the children of Israel free. Perhaps this is why God is so adamant about us being free, about us walking in freedom, so that we can be used by him to help others obtain their freedom.